So you touched on resilience. So what can we do to develop and support a child's sense of resilience?
It's a great question. And, it's something that it is complex. Sometimes when we talk about resilience, we talk about this monolithic big thing, like Natalie is resilient. And I'm sure you are. You're here with me, even though school's about to start again. We're having this conversation. We've never met. These are moments that can be quite difficult. But what we know from the research is that you can break it down. So there are kind of sub elements of resilience. And so some common ones are optimism. If a student feels optimistic, they're going to be more able to take hardship. So if they believe that things will work out for the best for them, then they're going to have a better chance of failing and coming back to a place of trying again. That goes along with growth mindset. Do you believe that things are difficult? If a student does not believe that things are difficult, then they're not going to most likely try. And so we see it in that resilience come out in some interesting ways, right? You see it in how girls will stay or not stay in complex math or sciences. And a lot of that comes down to also is that belief, that self-belief in doing something that's difficult, but also that perfectionism that says, I have to be good at it. And so we sometimes essentially take ourselves out of something before we fail. And so that kind of piece, it feels kind of different, but it's all part of the same resiliency. Failing is hard. It hurts. I failed pretty spectacularly and had to figure out how to be a successful person in my mind. Right. And so those things are really important. Other things are pretty easy too, though. Like we're talking about when students feel like they have, a real opportunity to keep going. And I think that perseverance component of what's happened now, if you're watching this and you are a parent, you are a teacher or a leader in Melbourne, we have had to get up every day over many, many days and try again and keep going, knowing that it wasn't going to change. And that perseverance, that ability to keep going is really important. So those are kind of the components, but the things that we can do to help are really pretty interesting. You can create spaces within your classroom or your home in which students can succeed or they can fail gracefully. So you can actually say that I'm going to give you a problem and I want 5 wrong answers. I don't want 1 right answer. In fact, if you give me a right answer, it's wrong. Because I want you to try and be creative and understand that it's okay. And I'm going to give you something that's complex because the thought process of doing it is as important as the thing that happened. You're not telling them don't succeed, but you're telling them to succeed is actually much different than just getting an A, finishing something correctly, which they might not be able to do because they haven't gotten to the developmental level or it's something they struggle with. And I think that can really, really help with building that resiliency.
I like that concept, and I've never really thought about it in terms of optimism. We've done a lot of work around growth mindset, like many schools have, and, ensuring that our language within the school changed around, I'm not able to do it yet, or that, sort of that terminology. But I like the way that you've linked it to optimism. I've never really thought about that kind of going hand in hand, but it totally makes sense around, obviously it's got to be linked to optimism because it's that concept of I can't do it now, but I will eventually be able to, or I will eventually achieve that goal or get that job that I want or whatever it may be. So I really like that correlation between those two. Yeah.
That self-belief thing, one of the things we're not talking about, but it's really important, is that there are certain social, cultural things that are really hard. There's some kids that are told they can't, right? Whether we like societally or in the way that the structure stuff, like if you're dyslexic or, and everything is around reading, or if you're from a low socioeconomic background and you need to have, you need extra help, but it's not possible, or you don't even know it's there. Yeah. There are those components. But what we see from the opposite is that when people believe in themselves, they actually attain more from that self-belief. Because they're confident and they're willing to keep going, and the failures are part of the journey. And I think that that's something that is harder. And it can be quite hard from a student at a young age being told they can't, because they're having to now they're hitting against something they trust, like they trust school or they trust their teacher, they trust this, whatever, and they're getting told I can't. So if you can build that optimism in safe ways, but still, I always joke that I'm a pragmatic optimist, which means that like I tend to have a very positive outlook, but it's always tempered by what's possible. Mm-hmm. And I always kind of keep that in my head. It's hard, right? Those are two somewhat competing things, but then it gives that student a pathway and currency and self-belief that is really, really just, it's the difference between success and not success for a lot of people.
Yeah. And that's a lifelong skill that, really needs to start when kids are young in order to, because, we're looking beyond the walls of a school. And this is about, helping kids reach their potential and be functioning citizens in society. That's the end goal. It's not about getting through kindergarten. It's about that longevity and that long-term goal of, contributing to society in some way.